Back in February of 2025, ranchers in Utah sued National Forest Service over cutbacks in grazing in Fish Lake National Forest. These cutbacks happened after conservation groups basically went in using the old assessments of the National Forest and sued the Forest Service for not following their own rules. Cut out the ranchers, cut out the grazing. You know, a lot of these assessments and these EISs, when the Park Service puts them out, they're based on old databases. So when they're talking about species of concern, sometimes those species aren't there anymore. Sometimes those species are no longer of concern because they've repopulated properly, but they don't have access to that information. They don't have boots on the ground. You would think the United States government could put boots on the ground to really understand this stuff, but they don't. A lot of this stuff is based on old databases, old data that is fed to them by conservation groups in order to put this in there that ranching is threatening, and then later on come back and sue and say, hey, you're not following your own EIS. To ranchers, this looks like some sort of backdoor ratchet on allotments. They're not wrong. Tonto National Forest in Arizona, there's another prime example of how conservationists have come back and sued the Forest Service saying that they're not following their grazing plans, or that they should halt grazing altogether because the Forest Service recognized that grazing is a threat. The only real threat here are the actual ranchers, because like I said, in Point Reyes, they're having to still graze the land in order to maintain it. And in Point Reyes, you know, they made the argument that this was all about the Tule elk, preserving the Tule elk. But then they'll go into a place like Potter Valley and take down a dam and say, now we have to depopulate the Tule elk by 90%. That 90% number is not confirmed, but we have confirmed that they are depopulating the Tule elk because of their desires to take down this dam, which of course was to save the fish. But it's rather interesting because the fish required so much cool water during the summer that they had to cut off water to ranchers in order to preserve the water flow for the fish. But the natural water flow coming down the Eel River wouldn't be enough to sustain the fish at what they said they had to sustain the fish at when they cut off all the farmers and ranchers. In other words, the dam actually protects the fish. Removing the dam would not protect the fish, would depopulate the Tule elk. These guys don't care about fish, they don't care about elk. The only thing that they're doing in all of those situations is shutting down farmers and ranchers. Some would say, well, how come these conservation groups don't understand that? It's pretty hard when you're getting paid a lot of money to not understand that. I pointed out in my last video talking about California, how Cal Trout, a division of Trout Unlimited, has received close to $700,000 from one of the largest shareholders of PG&E who wants to take down that dam. So they're pushing the narrative out there. They're getting paid handsomely to do it. The Nature Conservancy is getting $10 million from the state of California, just the state of California, to manage and restore the land of Point Reyes. We're not talking about small amounts of money here. So from an outsider's perspective, it does look like there are people still within the U.S. Forest Service that are purposefully putting this wording in there. They're writing the language into these assessments in such a way that it opens the door. It is a back door for ratcheting down on family farms and ranches. Then later on, these conservation groups come in and sue, and they said, hey, look, you said it was a threat. This is how you put it in your own assessment. This is your own wording. Follow your own rules. And the courts generally will look at that assessment and rule in favor of the conservation groups.